So each session is important, but I would say of all the 3 sessions, this is the most important. And it's certainly the one on the questionnaire that you kindly filled out before the conference was the thing that everyone sort of seemed to be wanting the most is more information on the products. Some of this material will not be new to you guys. I know there's a sort of breadth of experience of people on this session, so we are kind of going back to basics to a certain extent. I think that's very important for a product like Snappy Sounds because it's actually kind of new to everyone anyway. So a lot of the session is going to be dedicated to Snappy, as I said yesterday. But then we will also be looking at our other key products in IC. This is the slide that we put up yesterday, just as a reminder. The Max Maths, the Max Science, Snappy, talk about text and spelling rules. Now, if you do have your masks handy as well, then just put them to the side. It's going to be a couple of slides time, but just so you're aware that's coming up. And before we launch into Snappy Sounds, if you were on the session early today, you'll have seen this. This is our dedicated IC sales manual, which is also available as a flipbook version. I did send it out as a PDF attached to the sort of final reminder for the conference. But really where this has come from is that we were seeking to create a document for you guys that contains the key selling information for our program. So thinking about the sort of growth mindset approach, it's not about feeling stupid for not knowing certain things about a product, thinking that you should know everything about the product. It's more about making sure you have access to the information when you need it. And equally, if ever you need support, you reach out to the IC team and we will give it to you. But yeah, the intention for this manual is to make you feel sort of more supported in the product knowledge that you're required to sort of know for the IC product. Yeah, and Lucy created this, so big thanks to Lucy for pulling this all together. Thank you very much. And the intended audience, I mentioned you, the sales team, an internal document. So if you are seeking information on an IC product and you think, oh no, where do I begin? Then you can use this as a good resource. This isn't replacing our catalog, our customer-facing catalog that will be coming out later this year. This is very much a sort of internal document for you guys. And what's in it, you'll see when you go through it, but you'll note we've got an overview, components, target audience, benefits. Also the key sales resources, that's a really nice section because often we get emails asking, what support there is for each program. Some of the mapping documents, for example, we're going to talk about those a bit later. But there's a list of key sales resources within each product, what customers like, and competitor information as well. So I think I was going to give Rainer a little warning for the mask thing, which I think is sort of coming up now because it's the next slide. But we are going to move on to Snappy Sounds, and we're delighted that we have got. I wouldn't say live. I'm not going to fool you to say that she's live from Australia, but we have a pre-recorded video from Kristin Anthean, who was the lead author of Snappy Sounds, who shares some of her insight into sort of the creation of the program. And where she sort of sees the program as being particularly strong. So it's really great material that we've got for you to share this morning. But before we do that, we'll see how this works. Technically, it might not go too well, but in an attempt to create the most people on a Click meeting call on video wearing a crocodile mask, I would ask you, if you do have a mask with you, to put it on. And I believe, Rainer, you're going to hopefully turn on people's cameras. I'm not really sure how this is going to work. We'll see. It might not work. And you might just get a message pop up that says accept new settings or something like that, and you just need to click OK. OK, so Rainer is going to unlock your mics and videos, and you need to click apply settings to show yourselves. Dell's ready. Good, good. Oh yeah, well we've got. I think Aaron's doing. Oh, there's Aaron. Okay, I put mine on. Aaron's better than mine. We can see Amanda, but yeah. All right, it might just be the team. Well, there's 3 of us. That's not bad. I don't know if that's a world record.
Other people, I think, are coming on now.
Oh, okay.
I think, well, it looks like it. That's great.
So I'd like to call out Aaron. You've got felt on your. Is that felt or something you said that you had on your mask?
Yeah, it's got felt on both sides, so it's very comfortable to wear. Actually, my nephew wants to take this from me after this session, so advance happy birthday to him.
Did he help you make it?
He did indeed.
Yeah.
We had quite a fun afternoon making it.
Hi.
Yeah, I should also say, yeah, if you don't want to share your video, you don't have to. You can choose not to share it if you haven't done a mask or you don't want to as well. But yeah, great to see. Well, we've got 4 of us now with masks.
I feel like it's coming in alphabetical order. It's all.
Yeah, I think it's just.
Going in.
I think probably. I suppose we've got 55 people on. It's taking a bit of time, but.
Can we make it go on to? Mine's on a small screen. Can it go onto a bigger screen? Oh, hang on. I don't know if I do that.
Oh, we've got. Okay. Oh, we've got. Okay. Next one. Next one.
Internet connection is very unstable. Data.
Yeah, if people turn the mic off.
बोलो नहीं.
That's better, a bit more peaceful. Okay, well, I think we'll give this another minute or so before we move on to the video. Aaron asking. This may have been one of those things that could have been easier in a in-person conference as opposed to online. But hey, you've got to give these things a go, right? You've seen 4 of us anyway in our snappy masks. I think Ryan I think there's problems with unlocking people's videos, but yeah. I mean, if people want to email pictures of themselves in with the mask, then that would also be useful. But I think we probably should get cracking. I don't want to take up any more time of you guys with these masks. But thanks for your growth mindset in creating this stuff, and we will look forward to seeing pictures of you in masks if you haven't been able to appear on the video. Okay, right. So we will move on and. The first segment of Kristen's video, we've broken it out into 2. I'm just going to play now, and the intention is afterwards I'm going to pick out a couple of the sort of key points that she talks about with the creation of snappy sounds. And just to go right back to the beginning, just in case there are people on that don't know really what Snappy Sounds is at all. It was a program that was developed in Australia, and in fact launched in Australia about 6 months prior to the closure of the Australian business. It's a synthetic phonics program, which we will learn about, and we are truly excited about it. If you were on the call yesterday, you will know just how excited I am about it and what potential I think it has for the IC markets. It's targeted at a slightly younger audience, obviously with it being a phonics program than maybe what we're used to. But yeah, feedback thus far, I know particularly Middle East, Sherry, you've had some great feedback on Snappy, even though it's been so difficult to kind of reach people. And we did do a Snappy session a couple of months ago, which was kind of where most of you were probably introduced to Snappy for the first time. But yeah, let's hear from Kristen. Really great that she was able to do this video for us, and she's got some very useful insights. She's clearly, I mean, you'll see, you know, totally dedicated to phonics. She spent her life with this stuff, and you can kind of see when you see the program itself how much of her passion and everything is within it. Okay, so over to Kristen, hopefully.
Hello, I'm Kristen Anthony, and I'm the lead author of Macmillan Education's systematic synthetic phonics program called Snappy Sounds. So today I'd like to take a few minutes just to introduce my background, the motivation around the creation of Snappy Sounds, some of the challenges we experienced in developing the program, and of course some of the things that I'm most proud of. So I've worked in education for the last 30 plus years. 20 of those have been in special education, both in specialist settings and in mainstream education. So I'm currently working across 7 schools in the west of Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, supporting students that are experiencing difficulties, learning to read, to spell, and to write. So I have a diploma of teaching, a Bachelor of Education in primary, a postgraduate diploma in early intervention, and a master's degree in special education and inclusion. I'm also currently a certified member of Learning Difficulties Australia, as well as the Centre for Effective Reading Instruction in the US and the International Dyslexia Association as a certified structured literacy dyslexia interventionist. So I'm quite passionate about teaching kids to learn to read and to spell and leaving nobody behind in that process. So early on in my career, after I left university, like most young teachers, I was green and enthusiastic to get kids off on the right start to reading. What I soon discovered is that I had big gaps in my knowledge about the science of reading and how young children actually learn to read. I wasn't equipped with the knowledge that I need to have as part of my university training. And so slowly I've been trying to fill those gaps. And my hope is that Snappy Sounds will also fill those gaps for some teachers that perhaps are a bit light on in terms of that knowledge of English language structure and how young children learn to read. The motivation behind Snappy Sounds came as a result of Macmillan Australia contacting me late in 2018 to see if I was interested in being their lead author for a new synthetic phonics program. And of course I leaped at the opportunity given my passion in this area. Some of the early challenges that we experienced was developing a very specific scope and sequence. We know that English has a really deep orthography. It's a complex language to learn, and it's precisely this reason that we need to make sure that nothing's left to chance, that we teach it explicitly so that it's not kind of a process where children discover how our language works and how our print system works, that we teach it systematically. So we're teaching it from small skills to more complex skills, or simple skills to more complex skills, that we're teaching it cumulatively, so that prior knowledge that students learn, we build on that throughout the scope and sequence and throughout their learning journey as readers. So we had to incorporate some conceptual knowledge within the scope and sequence that's really important for both teachers and for young students to know. So some of this knowledge includes the fact that in our English language, we can have a printed form of our speech. So our speech comes to us in a continuous stream. So it's actually hard to hear those individual sounds. So we need children to understand that speech is made up of smaller components of sounds called phonemes, and we need to teach children how those phonemes are then represented by print through the letters on the page, which we actually call graphemes. So we needed to start off by explaining to young children that you could have one phoneme that is represented by one grapheme, such as in sit. We also need to explain to students that you can have two graphemes or two letters that represent one phoneme, such as the sh in ship. Again, that three letters can represent one speech sound or one phoneme, such as the DGE for the spelling j in hedge and fudge. Okay, and also that four letters can represent a speech sound. So that's a very complex thing that we're teaching young children, and even for teachers as well. Many teachers may not have gained that knowledge through their university courses either. The other thing we need to teach children is that one speech sound can be represented by different spelling patterns. For example, the sound ow can be represented by OU, like in cloud, but also OW, like in cow. The other thing that young children need to learn is that we can have one spelling pattern that can represent different speech sounds or different phonemes. For example, the OW that we said in cow can also be, which was the ow sound, can also be the O sound in the word snow. Okay, so this is a very complex process for young children to learn. And as a result, we need to make sure that we're teaching it very explicitly. So that was kind of the underpinning of the Snappy Sounds process, that we really make sure that nothing is left to chance, and it's informed by the science of reading, what we now know about the reading brain and how young children learn to read.
Okay, thanks, Kristen, for that first part. Now, it's complex. It's one of the messages she's getting across there. It's really not easy for young children to decode effectively. You know, they're so used to listening and hearing these sounds, but to be able to interpret how you put those sounds down on the page is a very challenging process. I want to pick up a couple of the points that Kristen made in that video, because a lot of the stuff that she's saying is actually a lot easier to see when you see it on a screen. So let me just get my presentation back. Okay, so as I said, I mean, a very complex process, this sort of decoding process, and breaking it down to the basic level. When you're talking to potential purchasers of the program, you know, if you're talking to distributors or whatever, I think, you know, these slides might be quite useful as sort of illustrations of just how complex this process can be. But ultimately, what we're saying is that the program is designed to make sure that children recognize speech is made up of smaller components of sound. So we call these phonemes, and at its sort of core, Snappy Sounds is designed to teach children how these phonemes are represented by print through the letters on the page. So graphemes, all right? This is in your sales brochure as well, so you don't need to know it immediately, but this is the sort of basic concept for Snappy Sounds, and in fact, you know, synthetic phonics programs overall. But yeah, just know those two, the phonemes and the graphemes. So the phonemes being the sound, and the graphemes being how those sounds are represented on the page. And a couple of examples that Kristen gave. So a sound like, or a phoneme can be represented by one grapheme. So the example that Kristen gave in her video is the S sound in sit. So note that the grapheme, or the letter, is just one letter in this particular example. An example where two graphemes can represent one phoneme is the SH in ship, so the sh sound in ship. It's still one phoneme, it's still one sound, sh, but it's represented by two letters. And when you kind of think about it, there's absolutely no reason when you just hear the sounds s and sh, why a child would ever sort of know that one of the sounds is represented by one grapheme and one is represented by two graphemes. And this is where obviously phonics comes in to teach that to children. And then she also gave an example of where three graphemes can represent one phoneme, and she gave a couple of examples, but the j for either edge or fudge, I think she said as well. But yeah, that's pretty complex when you get up to the three graphemes representing one phoneme. That's the sort of higher levels of Snappy, but it gives you a sort of sense of what the program is trying to do, and also just how complex the process is. Now, a little challenge. Can you think of, a bit difficult, I don't know. Can you think of any other examples where three graphemes represent one phoneme? So we're looking for a single sound, but a single sound represented by three letters. So the example that Kristen gave was the DGE sound in edge, because that's a j sound. It's a single phoneme, but it's represented by three letters. Can anyone think of any other examples where three graphemes represent one phoneme? I'll give you a little bit of time. Oh, that's actually yeah. Aaron said P from Snappy. Yeah, I'd say that. It's three letters. Yeah, and give the word as well. Bull, that's good. Yeah. So the example being the BLE in able. Bull sound is a single sound. Night. Actually, night's an interesting one because yeah, and that's kind of two at the end because you've got the t sound as well to finish. Oh yeah, the IGH in night. Yeah, IGH. Good one. Yeah. Strength. I'd say we're going into the realms of two phonemes there. Cool. Yeah. I need to go back to school to learn phonics. Yeah. Rhythm. Them. Yeah, that's a single sound. Nj. Lozenge. Yeah. Okay. So you get the idea then. Hopefully that's kind of made you realize it's not easy. But yes, James has got the one I've got as an example. Very good, James. TCH in catch. That is the example I've got as well. That's the only one I came up with. But yeah, that's yeah, single phoneme represented by three graphemes. All right, now the real challenge. What about four graphemes representing one phoneme? I feel like I'm not qualified enough in the realms of phonics to be a judge for this. We should have got Kristen on live or Charlotte or someone to do this, but I think that's one. 8, yeah. 4, 8, yeah. Monica, I'm going to give it to you. Lucy, you're very close. Lucy's very close with the letters. I would say cough. The off is actually two phonemes because you've got the o and the f. But you're close. Of those letters, the yes, I think we've got it there. I think Aaron's got one. The Q, yeah, the U E U E and Q U. Foreign is one, yeah. Oh, actually, no, foreign isn't one. Sorry, that's two phonemes. And the N. But yeah, the example I had was that OUGH sound in do. So it's effectively an O sound. And how difficult is that? So you're telling a child that effectively that sound can be graphically represented either by an O It can be graphically represented by an OH, and it can also be graphically represented by an OUGH when it comes to dough. So these are, yeah, we've only just sort of scratched the surface here, but this is not easy stuff by any means. And unless you approach learning these sounds in a systematic, constructive way, i.e. building up from the basic sounds right through the levels, then it is going to be more challenging to learn. And multiple studies have proven the success of the phonics process, the synthetic phonics process specifically, in giving children the skills they need to decode letters on a page into sound so that they can read aloud successfully. But it really does make sense when you start looking into the complexities of the language as to why you would want a sort of systematic process to do this. I think this is particularly true where English isn't a student's first language. So I think maybe even in more sort of English language speaking environments, possibly children can pick visual clues up from everything that's going on around them or what they're hearing. But it's even more challenging, obviously, when English isn't your first language. James is still coming out with those. He's still got a few more on there as well. Yeah, I'll give that one. NGUE, tongue, ng. Yeah, it's got an ng and a g sound in it. But okay, I'll give it to you. As I said, I'm certainly not anywhere near as certified as Kristen is, who really should be on here and judging these. So yeah, thanks for your participation on those. There's a few more to come in a little bit. So further evidence of these complexities in the reading process. And yeah, as I said before, I mean, these are quite good examples to give when you start thinking about just like, for a lot of us now, it's kind of automatic. You see these words on the page and you just automatically sort of create the sound in your head or even read it aloud. But often there's not necessarily any rhyme or reason for the sounds to be the way they are graphically represented. And an example of this is one speech sound or phoneme, as you now know, can be represented by different spelling patterns or graphemes. So this is sort of flipping it the other way. So the example that Kristen gave in that first video was the OW. So the OW sound, so this ow sound, sorry, the ow sound, not OW, the ow sound, the ow phoneme, can be represented by the letters OW, like in cow, but exactly the same sound, exactly the same phoneme can be represented by the letters OU, as in cloud. Okay, so these intricacies of the phonemes being represented by different graphemes, different letter structures. Is that all clear? I'm sure you'd shout out if on the text if you've got any questions, right? Just yeah, so Dell makes a good point. He says, what about cow and low? So that's an example where you've got the same grapheme, the OW, actually representing a different phoneme. Okay, adding to the complexities of the language. Okay, so yeah, that's another thing we could look at is how you teach that the OW sound can be two different pronunciations effectively. The OW grapheme can be two different pronunciations, two different phonemes, the ow or the o, the ow in cow or the o in low. All right. So one spelling pattern, grapheme, can represent different speech sounds. So this is what we were just saying, Del. So the OW in cow can also be, we've put snow as the example here, but you said low, so it's exactly what we just said. The spelling pattern OW can represent two different phonemes. You still with me, guys? Hope so. If not, then it emphasizes our message that this isn't necessarily straightforward. Okay, over to you now. Can you think of your own example where a spelling pattern represents different speech sounds? So the example that we had earlier, the spelling pattern OW can represent the sound ow as in cow or o as in snow. What other spelling patterns can you think of that represent different speech sounds? Yeah, we've got a lot coming in. Yeah, very simply the go and to. So the O's, if you put the O next to a G, it's go. But if you put it next to a T, it's oo, to. So it's a completely different sound. Yeah, the IE in pie and the IE in thief. So you've got the I sound or the E sound, depending on what word it is. Yeah, if you say bow instead of bow, I suppose, then the OW in bow is a different sound, ow, and our O. Yeah. So I think you're getting it. Raina, a local one there. I like it. Using a bit of geography, she's in Slough. So the place Slough has OUGH at the end, and this is a really good example actually. And then you've got the word tough, OUGH. So you've got an ow sound created by OUGH, but then you've got a uff sound created by exactly the same letters. Read and lead is a very good one. So the EAD sound, or you could also have it the other way. This is even more complex, isn't it? We're sort of saying you could have read, or that could be read. It could be the past tense. You could have lead, or you could have led. The EAD could be pronounced in those two different ways. Yes, Lucy, the breathe and breath. So the EATH in the middle is pronounced differently. Yeah, dough and tough. Yeah, that OUGH. Yeah, and some of this stuff you kind of, once you get into it, you're like, wow, this is really complex. What was this threat and caveat? Yeah, that's a good one. The EAT, good one, Dale. I think that might even be beyond Dale. I know you are Snappy Sounds Spafford today, but I think even that one could be beyond the highest level of Snappy Sounds. But who's not saying it? The threat and caveat. Threat and caveat. So the EAT in threat is an et sound, and the EAT in caveat is an iat sound at the end. Okay, it's great participation, guys. Thanks very much. Dell saying that's not a growth mindset way of thinking. No, maybe we can add a level on for the caveat one. Okay, but I think you're getting it. The one I had, and this is I've always talked about this with English language, is why don't you pronounce it dafter, or equally why don't you pronounce it laughter? But though that AUGHT spelling pattern can be pronounced as an aut sound in daughter, or as an aft sound in laughter. All right, so that's a sort of extended summary of the main points in Kristen's first part of the speech. But ultimately, when you're selling this in, and as I said, you can take some of these examples. The message is these children need a systematic approach to learning phonics, to learning these phonemes and how they're represented by graphemes. Because if you do it in a haphazard manner, if you don't build it up in the correct way, then it can be even more confusing. It's not like it isn't complicated enough as it is, but to have that structured program to deliver this stuff is really important. And this is what I sort of overheard a child saying. This idea, yes, it needs to be taught, and Kristen made this point, it needs to be taught explicitly. You need this dedicated time each day to learn this stuff. It's no good, relying on the fact that children are sort of maybe got access to books, they're reading books, they're listening to teachers reading books aloud. She's going to come on to it in a moment in her second part of the video, but there are any number of ways that children can kind of cheat in a way, and from a teacher's perspective, it can seem like that they have grasped the concept of converting a sound into a grapheme or vice versa, a phoneme into a grapheme or vice versa, but in actual fact, then they might be using other techniques that they would not be able to rely on long term. So yeah, this poor child is just thinking, if only a modern phonics program existed which addressed this need for explicit instruction to enable me to practice and learn about these complexities of the reading process in a structured way. And it just so happens that we do have a program to help this eager young child to learn phonics. Okay, are there any questions on that sort of first half from Kristin and the points she raises in it? As I said, I'm sure you would raise them in the chat box if you do. All clear? Okay. And yeah, just a reminder, you will get this presentation along with all of the others, and there'll be a recording of this as well, so you can review some of those complexities again. Okay, so let's hear more from Kristin now.
Some of the challenges that we experienced along the way was obviously developing a really specific scope and sequence. That took a bit of time. And also then making sure that anything that we developed based on that scope and sequence was carefully matched, so that children, when they became readers, they weren't using reading strategies that were not sustainable, such as guessing from picture cues or trying to decode the word on the page by using non-phonic skills. We know that this is something that poor readers actually do, that they don't use their phoneme grapheme knowledge to try and read the words on the page. They use lots of non-phonic cues to try and figure out that word, and it's not sustainable as a reader long term. So that was kind of one of the early challenges, making sure that scope and sequence, because everything else was going to be informed by that scope and sequence. Some of the other challenges for particularly, I suppose, the authors was with the decodable readers, was making sure that they understood that we couldn't have any words in the decodable books that children might actually try and guess at. That there was nothing in there that would encourage guessing type strategies that were not sustainable long term. So some of the things I'm particularly proud of include those decodable books as well, and the scope and sequence, of course. What I love about the decodable books is that we have both fiction and non-fiction text for children to access that are both very systematic in their approach and their scope and sequence, that they're cumulative, but that they're also really engaging books to read as well. And the great thing about the decodable books is that children develop early success, and building on that success, they want to continue to read. The other thing that I really like that was also a bit of a challenge were the teacher cards. On the back of the teacher cards, we wanted an explicit direct instruction approach that teachers could follow easily. So on the front of the card, they have the phoneme grapheme correspondence and the picture cue. On the back of the card, they have information about how to teach that, sentences to read and to spell, captions I should say, and also words to read and to spell as well. What was particularly difficult about that was making sure that we had enough information on the back of the card, but that it was quite simple and quite explicit and easy for teachers to follow as well. Okay, so the scope, on the teaching sequence on the back of the card, as I said, it has a very explicit direct instruction approach, and it goes from the teacher models, so nothing is left to turn to the teacher models first in the I do, then the teacher practices that skill with the student in the we do, and then students go off and do independent practice in the I do in the you do kind of part of that sequence as well. So it's the I do, we do, you do, and nothing is left to chance as result. At each step in the process, what we do is we go back and if need be, we check for, we always check for understanding, but if we need be, we go back and reteach before we get to independent practice. So the teacher cards are something I'm particularly proud of, and obviously the decodable books are something I'm particularly proud of as well. I'm also, I think it's really important when you're teaching systematic synthetic phonics that you can assess students' knowledge. Okay, so Snappy Sounds has an assessment tool that has pseudo words, or what we call non-words, that are fully decodable. Okay, so you can see if children are guessing at words or applying their phoneme grapheme correspondence to read words and sounds on the page as well, or the graphemes on the page. And so if you're finding that you've got gaps in your students' knowledge, then you go back and you reteach those components. It's really important that systematic synthetic phonics programs, including Snappy Sounds, are implemented with fidelity. So it's not kind of a piecemeal approach where you take something from one place or something for another place. You follow that quite systematically all the way through. So teachers do need to make sure that they have targeted time within their day, 30 minutes at the beginning of their day, that is set aside for systematic synthetic phonics instruction as well. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an understanding about Snappy Sounds, and perhaps a little bit of an introduction as to why I've enjoyed this project so much. And I am passionate about making sure that we don't leave anybody behind with our current processes where we encourage kids to learn to read books by guessing at picture cues or using heavily context cues. We're actually leaving about 20% of our cohort of students behind. And we know from the research of youth incarceration that we've got about 45% of young offenders that are functionally illiterate. So I think to produce a more literate society, we need to make sure that we get off to a really good start. Okay, we know that illiteracy has profound impacts on mental health, on socio-economic status, on the ability to engage in further education and training. So I hope you'll be as passionate about Snappy Sounds as I am, so that we have a more literate future for all. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Christian. And that passion really does come across in those videos, and the level of expertise that she has. I think it's another big kind of selling point of the program, that someone like her is behind it. She's very, very kind of detail oriented, and sort of when she talks about how she developed the scope and sequence for the program, kind of that comes across. So I'm just going to share my screen again, just to get a couple of the main points that she talked about there when she was developing the scope and sequence. It's so important that we get children relying on phonics skills when they are reading. Okay, and I alluded to it earlier, but there are sort of a number of ways that children can sort of mimic the idea of of applying their phonics skills for reading when actually they're doing other things. So she addressed the fact, poor readers, they don't use their phoneme and grapheme knowledge. They use other things, like they rely on picture cues or trying to decode the words using non-phonics skills. And that might work once or twice, it might work for a year or two, but ultimately in the long term, when you get to more complex words like maybe caveats that Del came up earlier, you need to be fully trained up in the art of converting graphemes into phonemes to be able to encounter those words, because ultimately children grow in their reading through independent reading. And this is one of the things we're trying to get with Snappy Sounds, is get children's ability to read up to a standard where they are comfortable and confident to read on their own. And as Kristen alluded to, children can fall behind very, very quickly. I mean, this is a much wider thing. It's not just phonics, but reading is so important to children. Really, actually, particularly boys between the ages of 7 and 10, where it tends to drop off, and then they can lose interest not just in kind of literacy and reading, but also just education as a whole, because reading is fundamental to kind of all subjects ultimately. So it really is that important ultimately. That's the bigger picture, but this is starting at the beginning. If they don't have the basic groundwork in place, that basic ability to use their phonics skills to build these reading strategies. So yeah, very easy to do if you look at kind of the first levels of snappy sounds, sort of very simple sentence structures. But what you'll find is that, as an example, you know, if an elephant is a subject in the story, or there's a word with elephant, you'll find that there's not a picture immediately beside that. So they're not encouraging children just to look at the pictures and guess what the words are. Okay. And then final points I wanted to make on that last video. Kristen was obviously very proud of the direct instruction, and when we looked at kind of the things that made up an international curriculum product at the beginning of yesterday's session, one of the things that we had in there was the teacher instruction, the teacher support, and that was built in mind of the fact that some of these teachers will not have English as a first language. In fact, you know, the vast majority won't in our markets. So the teacher cards was something that she raised as something that she's particularly proud of, and they practice this I do, we do, you do approach. She also mentioned the assessment tools, and I know Amanda's going to speak in a bit about the competition, in fact, just after this. But the assessment tool is something that does stand this program apart. And this idea, and I've mentioned it at the bottom of this slide, that no student is left behind. And the assessment tool in Snappy is fundamental to ensuring that no student is left behind. You know, if you are not implementing a rigid phonics program for children to learn this stuff and have a means of assessing exactly where they are, then a couple of years can go by and a child can find themselves in difficulty, and by that time it's very, very difficult to catch up. You know, you've got a couple of years to teach this. In fact, this can be done in 1 year, but this groundwork for reading and getting kids to be ultimately independent in their reading, it's not done over a long time scale. And if you miss the opportunity, again, we've got lots and lots of studies that show those children become very quickly demotivated, and trying just to get them back up to their normal level, or what's expected at a normal level, is incredibly challenging. So her final tips, this idea that it must be implemented with, she uses the word fidelity. So what do we mean by fidelity? It's really the care and the dedication in which you implement the program. You know, we're not just sort of dipping in and dipping out, using some of the books. And this is a danger, you know, with some of our programs like Talk About Text. You know, you can, pick up any book really, as long as it's at the right level, and you can get children to read it as sort of an independent book or whatever it might be. You know, this is phonics. This is very, very different. You know, children have to read through these books at the right levels, at the right pace, at the right time. True to say that some of the books may not be considered the most stimulating works of English literature ever created, but that is not the intention of the program. All right, the intention of this program is to ensure that students come away with that ability to relate phonemes to graphemes. So for the program to be successful, you have to have time set aside for this synthetic instruction, this systematic synthetic instruction. That's also a very good word that she uses. She likes to use a lot. It's not just synthetic instruction, it's systematic. So this idea of implementing it with care, with fidelity, dedicating regular time for children to be exposed to the program. And she recommends 30 minutes a day. And yeah, the assessment tools to ensure that no student is left behind. Are you excited? We got you motivated for selling Snappy? There's more to come on it. I'm gonna hand over big time. Nice. Okay, great. Right. Well, I'm gonna hand over to Amanda now. I think Raina's gonna just unmute your mic, and I will flick through your slides if that's okay, Amanda. If we can get you on, or maybe I can do it actually. Hi, Amanda, can you hear us? No? Oh, yeah, you might just need to unmute your mic, Amanda, possibly.
Okay, better?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Good. Everybody, well, you can't see me in my full glory, but I am just going to, so I am actually, for your benefit, wearing my Snappy Sounds crocodile costume. And before I go on and talk about the competition, I do want to say that because we're very generous in international curriculum, for the first successful sales of Snappy Sounds, you will receive your own, let me model it again, outfit. And it does come with some really super furry feet as well. So what more of an incentive could you possibly want? I just wanted to say hello. It's been absolutely lovely virtually talking to you all so far during the conference. So what I'm going to do now is take you through how Snappy Sounds compares against two of the major competitors which you will come across when you talk to teachers. Floppy Phonics and Jolly Phonics. So if we'll start with Floppy Phonics. Robin, could you do the first click, please? Okay, so I think as Robin and Kristen have said, assessment is a really key part of being able to do this systematic program. And there's no dedicated assessment program with Floppy Phonics. So a teacher will have to make up their own system for doing this, which is, which then becomes very open to interpretation, and different teachers will do this in a different way. Snappy Sounds assessment is absolutely amazing. It's simple to do. And I think when you're dealing with something that is as complex as synthetic phonics, teachers need confidence that they've got great tools to be able to support them. The assessment, there's two folders. And it includes tracking sheets, unseen texts, and an Excel spreadsheet to help them track pupil progression. And it also has a code so the teachers can go on and get digital video instruction on how to teach or how to manage the assessment. So that they're really beautifully produced and very, very easy to use. Do the next click, please, Robin. So Floppy Phonics is, of course, part of the OUP Oxford Reading Trilogy. So children very quickly become very familiar with the characters within it. And one of the great things about Snappy Sounds is that it's got a very modern, very global world feel about it. The OUP Oxford Reading Tree family has got quite old-fashioned feeling graphics, and within Snappy, of course, there's lots of non-fiction text, so it makes it much more appealing, specifically and especially for boys who often get left behind in the sort of early reading strategies. Next click, please, Robin. So a key feature of Snappy is this 30 minutes of reading per day that Kirsten and Robin have said is so important. So with Snappy Sounds, a child will be able to take home a book and say they can read within 1 week of instruction. With Floppy, that doesn't happen because the first book all about the creation of the sounds, so the oohs and the ows and the s. So the child is not reading a storybook. And I think the most important thing about this is that for a teacher, they can send a book home with their child after 1 week. So parents have loads of confidence that their child is progressing, and the child thinks they can read, giving them that very early confidence, building up their knowledge and getting them to start on those steps for having that first sort of love of reading. So I think that's really, really important. So in summary, with Floppy Phonics, no assessment. It's a bit boring. I think it's really boring, but I know that some teachers sort of particularly like that sort of traditional English feel about it, but I think those days have gone, really. And there's no quick way to start reading a book. So move on now, please, Robin. Thank you. So Jolly Phonics, can you do? Yeah, right. So this is really key with Jolly Phonics. There are 44 sounds to learn, but Jolly Phonics only teaches 42. So it just makes you wonder how really robust this is if it's missing something that is so fundamental to learning how to read correctly in English. Where are these other 2 phonemes? Because they're not taught explicitly within Jolly Phonics. Can you click again, please, Robin? So if you remember back to Kirsten's video, she talks about no child being left behind. And indeed, her experience with phonics would show that it would take 2 years to successfully cover all the phonemes, the graphemes, and the ability to blend. Jolly is a 1-year program, which suggests it either goes too quickly or it doesn't go deep enough. Either way, the chances are that a child will get left behind. And as we've said earlier on in this, leave a child behind and you've lost a learner. That, Haluk, you put in the box, in the chat box, that learning to read is so important for them being able to go on and do everything else. So particularly if you think about Max Maths and Max Science, you've got to be able to read English before you can really grasp maths and science in English or any other subject. So Snappy Sounds 2-year program with its robust assessment should ensure that no child ever gets left behind. Can you click on, please, Robin? Wow, Jolly is a massive, massive program. It's 30 years old, so it's had so many different components added to it and options to purchase, which to my mind creates 2 problems. Firstly, what do I buy? If I'm looking at it for the very first time, how on earth can I decide from all these things, these components, what is key? And secondly, if you're joining a school as a new teacher that's been following Jolly, then, really good luck to you, because I don't know how you get your head around all the different components. I think that, Snappy Sounds is really easy. It's easy to buy. Buy the books, buy the lesson kits, buy the teacher packs, buy the assessment. 4 bits that you can buy. It's contained. So a teacher can easily see what they need to purchase. And with the support from the teaching cards, it makes it very easy for new teachers to pick up and use. So, it's just, I think that Snappy it's so easy when you look at it. Easy for a complex subject. I don't know how people get their head around Jolly. And the other thing with Jolly, because there are so many different components, I think you could probably get lost going off. It's not this very explicit approach of Snappy Sounds. And finally, Jolly is also pretty old-fashioned to look at. It's not changed much in the 30 years that's been in the marketplace, and it doesn't have the appeal of the high-quality Snappy Sounds titles with its modern graphics, loads of photographs, and world topics. So, in summary, where's the missing phoneme? There is a risk of children being left behind, and because it's old, lots of bits and pieces have been adding. have been added, which make it muddling to use and muddling to decide what. I want to say in the folder on the Google Drive, you will find a Beat the Competition sheet, which contains all the information I've been through. And also, if any of you are finding you're coming up against any other phonics programs in your area, making sure that they are synthetic phonics programs, then give us a shout and we can do some background research into the competition, into how those products break down for you. Thank you. Next slide, please, Robin. So I just want a quick reminder of everything that we have created to support you. Again, the slides will be available, so don't worry about writing these down now, but anything with an ISBN is orderable. Please email Aaron and he will send them out to you. Maybe Aaron, you could drop your email in the chat box. The sample packs are really great tools. Got 2 books, Sam and Thunder. You've got the teacher cards, worksheets for the sounds, and you've also got the placement mat. There's a A2 poster which you can order, which is to put up in the classroom, and the teacher can use it to work with the children on the phoneme of the day. There are digital codes for selection of titles from each of the levels, so you can, if you want to send those out to teachers to have a look at, then those are available to you. Email me and I can ping those out to you. There's a phonics booklet, which is a 12-page booklet on how and why to use synthetic phonics in the classroom, written by Charlotte Rance. That is available for you to have print copies, or if you want the electronic files, then again, let us know. Updated Snappy Sounds brochure, which mentions the digital aspects of it. There's a positioning document, an A4 sheet on why synthetic phonics works, mainly for internal use. And there is a pull-up banner for conferences and workshops. So again, let me know if you want those. And on my notes here, I've got breathe. So I'll breathe now. And then I just also wanted to mention that we have a full webinar program in August, and we'll share the dates and the digital banners with you shortly. And their first webinar for literacy, developing literacy skills, is on the 25th of August. So thanks. You don't know, there aren't digital versions for all the books. Oh, hang on, there are. Sorry, there are digital versions for all the books, and Robin will speak about those in a minute. What I've created are flip books, Murat. So if you want to send samples out to any of your teachers, then we've got samples with flip books that they can look at, which are easier perhaps than going on to the NEE platform to download them. So yes, so 2 different things. The flip books that I've created, the digital codes, are for promotional purposes. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure to share all this with you, and good luck with selling Snappy Sounds. Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, we had a couple of questions through, I think, on digital. So the session tomorrow, where we're titled the Digital Opportunity Session, I'm going to actually spend about 10 minutes in the Snappy Sounds digital on that platform, because it's such a big part of the program. It's one of the key selling points, actually. And yeah, all of the books are available to customers on our e-reader, and there's also some fantastic videos, sort of teacher support videos, and kind of all of the teacher resources are on there as well. So we will have a closer look at those in tomorrow's session. Go-to-market strategy, I'm going to go on this just quickly, but you're really selling 2 things when you're selling Snappy Sounds. The first thing you're trying to sell in is synthetic phonics. And you know, there are a number of studies, there's this one here with UK Department for Education, sort of proving the success of synthetic phonics and how it improves reading fluency and ultimately makes children more successful later in their life in their ability to be able to read, and they don't get left behind, as we've discussed. But then you're also then selling, once you've sold synthetic phonics, you then have to sell in snappy sounds. And there's a number of reasons. I mean, a lot of them Amanda has addressed with the comparison with the key competitors. But one of the big standout parts of this program is the digital. Apology if you're struggling to hear me. I think the internet is a little bit unstable, but I will carry on and hope that you can hear me. Where to sell? We said international schools, the private language schools, kindergarten. So I mentioned that actually this is kind of a lower level from some areas. There could be new opportunities in your markets. As Amanda says, yeah, let us know if there's anything that you need created specifically. Really, as a sort of go-to market strategy, given what Amanda's just sort of said about the competition, we do feel there is a good opportunity to approach schools that are already familiar with synthetic phonics, that are already using some of these competitor programs, and position SNAPI as an alternative, and really be confident with the digital component, really be confident with the digital offering, and go in and showcase that. I'm just going to check my video is on standard definition, because I think there's problems with the bandwidth. Okay. So yeah, the how to sell said, gain full confidence in presenting the product's digital component. Amanda mentioned the beating the competition document. She summarized it wonderfully there, sort of in those couple of slides against the two main competitors, but do let us know if there's anyone else that you're facing in marketplace. We've got the positioning synthetic phonics and snappy sound resource in the shared drive, in the Google Drive as well. There's a really good piece in there that Charlotte did, really from the sales team perspective, about beginning conversation. So what questions should you be asking of your potential customers, schools, from the outset when you're introducing SNAPI? The physical pack that Amanda mentioned. So this is a really good resource to send in, because it gives a very good overview of what SNAPI Sounds is all about. You've got the two books in there, the two readers, but also the teacher card. You've got a placemat, and really sort of showcases the program. I mean, what I would say about SNAPI as well, although from our perspective, selling the readers and the price tag attached to the readers is where a lot of the revenue comes from, actually for implementing the program, a lot of the classes, a lot of those 30 minutes are not going to be taken up with the readers. They're going to be taken up with the activities that are presented on the teacher cards and via the worksheets. So from our perspective, it can be easy to sort of get sort of taken up with all of the readers and all of the various levels and everything. And obviously they're a key part of the program, but the majority of the time in lessons is going to be spent on those teacher cards and on the worksheets. Yeah, and then just ensure that you follow up. When we do these webinars, I know Charlotte did a great webinar in June. We had a lot of leads from them. I know it's more difficult in these times to do the follow-up that we would like, but just ensuring that once we've kind of piqued people's interest by getting someone like Charlotte to do a webinar, making sure that the people that have expressed interest are followed up with. And the digital codes, I'll mention more of these, more on this tomorrow, but getting customers also comfortable with the digital element of SNAPI Sounds will be a big part of its success. Okay, so now we've got Charlotte. So in the questionnaire that you did before the conference, you gave us the questions that you had for our consultants, one of the consultants being our literacy consultant, Charlotte Rance, who I know some of you have met. I know when she was with us, she left in January. These are the three questions that came up in relation to literacy. The first two are related to SNAPI Sounds. The last one is probably more general, maybe more related to talk about text, but we're going to play all of them now and her responses to these questions that you gave her.
Hi everybody, my name's Charlotte Rance and I'm here to talk to you about snappy sounds and synthetic phonics today. So, question 1, what are the different types of phonics methods and what is the benefit of snappy sounds using a synthetic phonics method? There are 3 main varieties of phonics used in education: analytic phonics, embedded phonics and synthetic phonics. Each of these methodologies is based around the core idea of identifying the sounds of English, phonemes, and matching them to the ways they can be written, or graphemes. But the difference between the 3 is the approach they take. So, analytic phonics is taught by encouraging children to recognize similarities and differences between words. In the classroom, the teacher might discuss what's the same about words such as wipe, wing, weather, and children are asked to listen, notice, and deduce for themselves that when they hear a W sound, that it should be written with a grapheme W to represent it. One of the major criticisms of this approach is that it assumes a base of knowledge, a base of phonemic awareness skills that children need to accurately compare and contrast what they're hearing. This is not always the case, even in a first language classroom. Many children require extensive guidance and support to enable them to notice similarities and differences. And in an international context, we find that the children often have a varied level of experience with oral and written representations of English, meaning that they don't have the tools that they need to pick up on the distinctions between similar sounds, and that in its turn makes an analytic approach much less effective. Embedded phonics is part of a whole language. Phonics is part of a whole language approach. So embedded phonics is a sort of phonics you generally find in an ELT book. The curriculum is driven by the vocabulary, the grammar, and the phonics is secondary as and when it's thought to be necessary. So a teacher begins by introducing a whole word, typically as part of a sentence or story, and then the children are asked to decode words, break them down into individual sounds. It's often used as part of a daily routine within the classroom, so teachers highlighting certain sounds during circle time, such as today is Wednesday, what sound does Wednesday begin with? Asking the children to listen and recognize. While it uses the same techniques as a synthetic approach, it doesn't have a comprehensive syllabus. So the major criticism of embedded phonics is that it overlooks core elements of language, leaving gaps in the student's knowledge. This brings us to synthetic phonics, which is the approach used by Snappy Sounds and also the major competitors of Snappy Sounds, such as Jolly Phonics or Floppy Phonics. Synthetic phonics is the most widely used approach because it is the one approach that is comprehensive and logical. It's a systematic approach to learning. So the children learn starting with the key phoneme grapheme correspondences, starting at the easy to identify sounds within English and the common representations of them, such as S, as the letter I, or T, represented as the letter T. And they then progress building through to more complicated sound representations. All synthetic phonics programs follow an almost identical order of instruction because phonics beginning with sound and letter combinations that are frequently used, simple to understand, then moving on to the less obvious representations as they progress through the levels. And it is a very comprehensive approach. So when you're working with a program like Snappy Sounds, you're ensuring that the children in the classroom are able to identify the phonemes, the spoken sounds, the graphemes used to identify the phonemes, the spoken sounds, the graphemes used to represent them in English, but also how to segment or break down individual phonemes in a word so that they can spell effectively. And they will also encounter the multiple representations of written English. So, for example, they will learn that one sound might have multiple ways of spelling it, such as the A sound, where in the word rain it's an AI, in the word play it's an AY, in the word eight it's an EIGH. They'll learn that phonemes can be represented by single letters or by groups of 2 or 3 or 4 letters, multi-letter graphemes. And finally, they will also learn that because English is as complicated as it is, the same grapheme might make more than one sound. So, for example, the letter C could be a hard K, like cat, but it could be a soft S sound, such as circle. This is why synthetic phonics is so popular around the world. But what makes synthetic phonics and snappy sounds beneficial in a non-native English context? Well, as we've said, even for a native speaker, the process of learning to read and write in English is long and complicated. Some languages have the benefit of being phonetic languages, i.e. one letter has one sound and one sound only. English is not like that. It's much more complex and much more difficult to tackle. We have 44 unique sounds, only 26 different letters in the alphabet, so consequently all of our spelling options have to come from those 26 letters, allowing us to create multiple combinations of letters which represent specific sounds. While phonics was developed to teach aspects of English to native speaker children, it has actually become incredibly popular in an international context because it applies patterns to English spelling. Phonics instruction enables learners to connect those sounds with 200 or more letter combinations that represent them. It's been shown to improve reading, writing and pronunciation ability, and it's also incredibly beneficial for learners who are encountering the Roman alphabet for the first time. So if the children are native Arabic speakers or many of the Asian languages which don't use the Roman alphabet to represent their words commonly, also Cyrillic language speakers, so Russia and Greece as well. When you're encountering a language system and alphabetic code for the first time, it's very, very useful to be able to attach those patterns. As such, using snappy sounds in an international classroom will help the learners get a confidence boost. It gives them the tools they need to tackle the words that are in front of them. And once you've got those tools in place, students become bolder and much more willing to experiment with English than they were previously. Of course, that then has a knock-on effect for other areas of language development as well. So, final question, what's a reading levelling system and what is the benefit of a reading levelling system and which system do our reading programs follow and why? Reading levelling systems are designed to organise written texts into levels of complexity to enable students to build their reading skills. When you're placing a text along a gradient of difficulty, there are lots of factors that are considered. These include the length of the text, the number of pages, the number of words on the page, the number of lines on a page, the layout of the text, how much space is there between words, structure and organisation of the story, so in terms of plots and repetition, repeated structures, and even time organization as well. So, you know, a simple book will start at the beginning and end at the end. As we move up through levels, there might be flashback elements within that. Of course, illustrations play a key. The lower level books are very much supported by images, and the vocabulary, phrases and sentences on the page as we develop become more complex. Sentences start to include embedded clauses, different features of literary organization, And also, the final element of grading a leveled reader is content and theme. So young children's books typically focus on themes that are familiar to them and then move on to sophisticated themes as you work through the level, working in conjunction with the development of a child's brain. What reading leveling system do Macmillan International Curriculum titles use? They are typically based around the reading recovery system. The reason for this is that it is the most predominantly used system in Australia, where many of the Macmillan International Curriculum titles were developed. The benefit of the reading recovery system is that it's incredibly useful in an international context. It was designed for struggling native speakers, which means that in an international context, there is so much extra support for the teachers and the learners to use to help them understand what they're reading. And of course, a much finer leveling system, enabling the children to step by step build up their knowledge, build up their confidence, and learn to read fluently through English. It is, of course, not the only reading leveling system that exists. So if you are working with schools that use a different leveled reading system, you will be able to find online lots and lots of comparison charts to see how the reading recovery system correlates with other reading leveling systems along the way. So if you do have questions about that, just jump online and you will find all the answers. I hope that's helped. I look forward to seeing you all again in the future. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Charlotte. So those are the questions that you had, literacy questions anyway, that you had to put to Charlotte. Right, I make no apologies for spending such a long time on effectively snappy sounds, because, as I said, it is going to be our future star. We're going to generate a lot of revenue from it, so I'm very confident, and hopefully you found this last hour and 20 minutes we've now dedicated to Snappy effectively very useful. If you do have any questions related to Snappy, please don't be shy. Please come and approach us if you have opportunities, whatever support you need. Shout out and let us know, and we'll see how we can help you. But yeah, we'll be looking at the digital part of Snappy for a little bit of tomorrow's digital session. So that will be just a sort of screen sharing session to see the tools that are available digitally for the Snappy Sounds product. And yes, don't forget that amazing prize that Amanda has said is a crocodile costume. I think is it a new costume, or is it your costume, Amanda? I don't know. We'll see. I think it's a new crocodile outfit you get. That's the prize. No, yeah, you get a new one. Great. Okay, so we're going to move on quickly to Max Maths now. Max Maths Primary. We've got some great videos from Andrew Jeffrey, mathematics consultant. A very quick summary, and again, I'd like to draw your attention to the sales manual that we've had created, which includes this information. But really the main aim of the program, Max Maths, which I think most of you are pretty familiar with by now. It's our biggest selling program in the International Curriculum suite of products. We teach core mathematics through this concrete pictorial abstract approach. Predominantly that's sort of Singaporean method of teaching mathematics, and make sure that effectively students are problem solving and kind of, it's a bit of a cliche to say, but sort of learning outside the box. So often there might be more than one solution to a problem, and they're not learning things by rote. In the same way that when we talked about Snappy Sounds, we didn't want children to kind of rely on these sort of lazy techniques of getting to an answer, which they then can't sustain going forward. In that sort of way, with Max Mathematics, we're teaching children the tools to be able to solve larger problems, any problem. So they're applying that problem-solving technique when they're working out they're working out the questions. And then supporting the development of key skills, the independent learning, critical thinking, and collaboration. And it's such a shame at the moment. I mean, that's an element that is more challenging to do if you can't be in a classroom with other children. But the idea behind the Singaporean approach is that it is very collaborative. It encourages children to work together, maybe to sort of form two opposite arguments and have a discussion and reach a conclusion. Again, this sort of problem-solving approach. So the first video we're going to hear from Andrew. He's going to give an overview of Max Maths. He does actually say, I think, hello again at the beginning, but we haven't seen him thus far. Don't worry, you're not imagining things. So let's hear from Andrew.
Hello again. Now, in this little clip, I want to talk about a couple of other questions. One about the CPA, or Concrete Pictorial Abstract approach to learning mathematics, and also very briefly about bar modelling. So to understand the theory behind CPA, which goes back to the 1960s really, or became popularised then, I want you to have a look at this picture. Now, you can see that this picture, I'm thinking that there'll be people here who know that this is a picture of three things saying the same number, the number 16. But if I was to ask that in, for example, England, I might get a different answer. In fact, I asked one teacher just as an experiment, and they told me, oh, does it say 16, 17 and 18? But here's the difficulty with working purely in numerals. We all see them differently. Now, the thing is, all of those three numbers are 16, but none of them look like 16, do they? If you look at these three, on the other hand, or four, now you can see that these images are more helpful, whatever your first language is. And so for many of you here today, you'll be working with people involved in second language teaching and learning. I recommend this image is a very powerful one for you. And you'll see it all the way through the Max Maths primary books. I've picked up a year 5 one here, and there were a couple of pages. Here's an example of how fractions works under CPA. Now, you might think that's just pictures, and it is, but look how they're able to show really accurate fractions there. Okay, and on this side as well. And the image is very consistent about equal chunks in a bar. Let's have a look at another one. Dean's blocks. You see these tens, ones, and hundreds, and a really interesting way. And this is just a picture of the actual material. Okay, it's important that they have the actual material, but eventually they'll be able to visualize and just use their internal imagery of it. Now, you saw some bars there, and you may be aware of these two bar modelling books that Macmillan have produced, which I created to go with Max Maths Primary, really, and they're all about how to teach bar modelling in stages 1 to 6. And again, you'll find that they take you through very simple steps, what people need to know about drawing bars, some kind of complex questions, and of course solutions, and the 10 steps that you need. Why it helps is because often questions are written in English, and yet children aren't thinking in English. And so as we saw from that last picture, this one, that slide helps us all be looking at the same thing. And once we're all looking at the same image, then we can start learning together as a group. So I hope that helps. Just a very short piece on why CPA is important and how to implement it. And you'll see a few different resources there that you can use. You've got Numicon, Cuisenaire, Dean's blocks, those counters with place value on, all of these things, straws, all of these things are really useful tools. So I recommend that you look more into that if you can. I hope that answers your questions, because I thought it would be useful to just show you a couple of bar model examples. This question about Rajesh and Kathy highlights the difficulty of the word more. Now, normally when you see some numbers and you see the word more, the temptation is to add them together. But you see from this bar, the way the bars are drawn, it's clear that it's the difference between the two that will give the answer. And so that's what the bar does. It helps you find that calculation. Let's have a look at a second one, finally. This one's a little bit more complicated, but again, you've got two blocks of something the same, the cost of the bananas, and then this whole thing represented by the money. So you can see the calculation is going to be 500, take away two lots of 130. And that's really what the bar can do for you. All right, enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Andrew. We're going to hear from Andrew again in just a moment. Just before we do, I wanted to just go over the components that we have available for the Max Maths Primary course that you can see here. So the student books, the workbooks and the journals and the teacher guides on the print side. We also have those bar model books that you saw in Andrew's video. The digital we will look at more closely in tomorrow's session, but the digital elements that we have available, and this is one of those opportunities that I cited at the end of yesterday's session. I think we can sell a lot more digital than we have been. The student book is available on a 12-month subscription, and the digital teacher presentation kit, which contains a number of resources, including access to the digital student book, and there's a teacher resource center as part of that as well. But the digital we will look at a little bit more closely in tomorrow's session. Right, so you also had questions for Andrew in the same way that you had literally questions for Charlotte, and these were the ones that came up and that Andrew has answered for us in the video that I will share now.
Hello everyone, and thanks so much for having me, albeit virtually. I'm delighted to spend a few minutes with you answering some questions. And the first question is, how can we change a student's perception from I can't do maths to I'll give it a go, I suppose? And I won't lie, that is not easy. But I have a couple of tips for you. The first thing is your attitude. If you constantly believe in them, and you show that you do, then I think that really, really helps. There's a couple of myths around learning maths that I think it's also good to put to rest. So if you want to myth bust with your students, here's a couple of ways. The first thing that people sometimes say is you have to be clever to be good at maths. But let me tell you, there is no such thing as a maths gene. Scientists have mapped the entire human genome and nowhere did they find a maths gene. It's just not true. What works is practice. Okay, it's not true that some people can be good at maths and others just can't be good at maths. Everyone can do it. All right. And in fact, you might be interested to hear of a study done in 2018, so quite recently, in Stanford University in America, where they found something really staggering. IQ does impact, certainly, on attainment, but attitude, your attitude towards maths, has exactly as great an impact on your attainment as your IQ level. And that's really incredible. So children who try really can succeed. The second myth that I want to bust, which might help, is well, it's okay to be bad. You know, most people are bad at maths, and you only need maths if you're going to be like in a sort of sciencey or engineering job. And you know what? That's easy to bust. That is just not the case. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're working in retail, working out things, or whether you're working in a hairdresser's, working out ratios of hair color. It just absolutely doesn't matter. An author working out words per minute, pages per chapter. It absolutely doesn't matter. Every single job that anyone will ever do requires mathematics in some shape or form. It's a really good discipline for the brain. So I think in a classroom setting, there are maybe 3 steps. The first step is context. They might not be that interested in percentage differences or rates of change, but if you can tie it to maybe the trip that they're organising or an event that they're planning, then they'll be a bit more interested. So give it some context. Instead of saying what's 2.7 times 4.6, make those mean something. I've got it costs £2.70 a kilogram, and I need 4,600 grams. How much is it going to cost? Just for a particular thing. Relevance to them. Okay, many. I saw an example for like a bad question with a 5-year-old the other day saying, if I cycle 3 kilometers in the morning and 4 kilometers in the afternoon, 5-year-olds don't do that. So think about the person, match the mathematics to the person. Relevance. Why do I need to know this? And scaffolding. Now, scaffolding means lots of different things, but effectively put those small steps in place. Model what a good answer looks like, and revisit things. There's often a problem with memory. If children struggle to remember things, it's partly because their brain doesn't think it's very important. So regularly ask them to remember what they did yesterday or last week or last month. And finally, I would say, talk to them about what I call the happy triangle. Now, the happy triangle is the triangular relationship between effort, which leads to success, and success leads to confidence, and confidence leads to effort. If you feel confident, you'll make more of an effort, and that is the opposite of a vicious circle. It's a happy triangle. So I hope that's an answer to that question. Now, our second question was about the use of manipulative resources, but virtually. Now, we should just qualify this by saying the best thing to do, if at all possible, is to give children and students practical, hands-on, physical resources. But the best thing I've found in terms of a website to support doing it virtually is this one. So I'm just going to type MathsBot. And you'll see this comes up, mathsbot.com, and I want you to notice the thing that we need is up here, and it says manipulatives. Now, this website is totally free to access, and if I click manipulatives, you'll see that I find a whole range of things. There are algebra discs. Now, these are great. I don't know if you know what algebra discs are, but you can have x and negative x, and if you put negative x with x, it will make a zero pair and disappear. So those are algebra tiles. Let me go back, show you a few other ones. Bar modelling. Now, you may or may not know that Macmillan published 2 bar modelling books, which I created, and you can do bars as well. There's a bar. You can move it around. Okay, you can put another bar on, and maybe I want to make that one slightly bigger. Okay, and I can stretch it and compare it and so on. I can do pretty much anything I want. I can even add some language to this. So what is the total of 4 and 5 for a very young child? Okay, and I can model it with putting these together like this. Okay. I can even stretch this if I can make it bigger. Oh, I can put a brace over it anyway to show that the total is these 2 things together. So what else has it got? It's got absolutely loads of things. Place value counters. These are terribly useful. Look, so I want to model the number 1,232. All right, let's tidy that up a bit. 1,232. There it is. Okay, and I can even exchange. How about this? I can exchange that one of those 10s for 10 ones, and then I can start to think about how subtraction works. Okay, so I've got the same amount of stuff. Whoops. So I think that's really helpful. There's also, if you're into Cuisenaire rods, if you're into fractions, tens frames, very, very useful. Domino frames, also useful. Even if you just want to make resources, so you could create a domino. Okay, let's change the size of that one. 3. Okay, I could then do a screenshot, and then I could place my screenshot into a document that I was working on. What about these geoboards? These are rather fun. So you can add rubber bands to things or lines to the documents. I've often found that rubber bands in classrooms don't always work as well as they should. And you just have fun, really. There's if you're into Numicon, there's Numicon here. For copyright reasons, they have to call it number frames, but we all know what it is. Okay, base 10 blocks if you use those. There we go. So I hope that's a good example of how to use manipulative resources and make them virtually on a computer screen for you. So our third question is about useful strategies for group work. Now, obviously we could spend hours on this, but I just thought I'd share two things with you, two quick things. The first thing is to give a series of questions for a table to discuss, and you give statements, and the statements are something that may or may not be true. So I might say triangles have a line of symmetry. Now, unlike true or false, this activity is called always, sometimes, never, because any statement you make is either always true, sometimes true, or never true. It rains in Berlin on Mondays is sometimes true. Might feel like always, I don't know. Yeah, Tuesday follows Monday is always true, and so on. So a triangle has a line of symmetry, of course, is sometimes true. So you give a bank of these statements and written on cards, and students sit in groups, and they have to basically assign the cards to the groups, to one of three piles, either the always pile, the sometimes pile, or the never pile. And one thing that makes this really effective, I've discovered, is to have the cards physically in people's hands, and then they can read them out to each other, forcing listening and that kind of thing. But also, you can only do one card at a time, and you're not allowed to move on until everyone in the group is agreed. And this is good because there are children who don't know, but who need to be convinced by somebody else. And it draws out all that misconceptions and that a chance to explain it. There's a sort of 50-50 rule which says 50% learning, 50% explaining to someone else is probably a very good and effective way to get things done. Here's an example sheet. This is from the book I wrote called Always, Sometimes, Never. Not a great title. You can see this is a geometry one, and on the left is the page with the question cards that you can cut up, and on the right is the explanation. Now, if you want, you could even stick those on the back if you were working in a one-to-one situation. So that's my first strategy. And the second strategy for now that I'll share is simply this. Don't give the whole problem to the whole group. This is a bit more time consuming, but you might, for example, give one person a card which says, I'm thinking of a number, what is it? And someone else would have a card saying the number is even, and someone else would have a card saying it's square, and someone else would have a card saying it's a one-digit number, and so on. So they would have to work together and listen to each other carefully and build those collaboration skills. No one person, however clever they are, can work out the answer on their own until they've heard everyone's input. Those are just two strategies that I found have been really helpful for getting children to learn productively in groups and learn from each other, and I hope you find them helpful.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Now we've planted a question here around summative assessment to Max Maths on the chat box. I'm delighted that James, or our publisher, is here to run us through what we've got in store for you guys on the assessment side. So I think if Rhino's able to unmute James's microphone, and even camera if you want, James, if you want to appear in vision, if the bandwidth can support it. But yeah, a lot of people commenting there that they could do, yeah, I could have used that when I was young. I really like the digital manipulatives. That's a question that we get asked quite a lot. And, you know, that is definitely a good solution, is to use the digital. Hi, James. Welcome.
Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Can you see me, hear me?
We can, yes. Thanks
Fabulous. So you're gonna change the slides for me, right?
I am. Just give me a ping, or if you got a bell there, you said.
I've got. I don't know. Does
Oh yeah.
that work?
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
my mug. So
Okay, you can do that. Yeah.
that's going to get a bit tiring by the
No,
end,
it's
I think. Okay. Hi. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to kind of be here and see you all, or not see you all actually, but just be in your kind of virtual presence. It's great. So I'm here. If you were at the conference in Cairo, you would have heard a little bit about these earlier in the year. So I'm going to talk to you for about 10 minutes on a new summative assessment component for Max Maths. So it's going to be, I've just been told this morning they should be in the warehouse on 14th of August, which is only a couple of weeks away. So they're virtually here already, a couple of weeks ahead of schedule. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a bit about them. So what have we done? And why have we done it? So we've added an assessment component to the existing Max Maths scheme, and we've done it because summative assessment is very important in the primary mathematics classroom, because it's an effective way of measuring a student's attainment or the level of of what they're absorbing of the teaching, if you like. And of course that's important for the student. It's often important for the teacher, often important for the parents too, the paying customers for the school itself, and sometimes even the country in which the school's in. So there's some great benefits about having an integrated summative assessment scheme that's easy for teachers to use and pick up and use as part of their day-to-day maths teaching. So I'll do a click. Robin. Hey, excellent. And another one. Great. Okay. So what does that? Oh, that's too many. You're gone too far. Back another one.
I think there's a delay, that's why.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah. So, okay.
So there should be another one before this. That's it. That's the one. Okay.
Okay.
So
yeah, there's a delay. But
there's a delay, is there? Okay. I see. Okay. So what are the Max Maths assessment books? So they are they should be everything you need to deliver a program of summative assessment throughout every school year from grade 1 to grade 5 if you're using Max Maths. They come in the form of 6 books, 1 for each grade level. And there are supporting, printable tests that are going to be supplied through the Max Maths TRCs, which are available when they purchase the TPK. So basically, yeah. So in the books, you've got an introduction and the assessments, mark schemes, and then on the TPKs you've got the printed versions of the assessments, so you can just run them through a printer and give them out to your students. The assessments have been written by our very own Mohi Uddin. Some of you might know Mohi as one of our trainers. He has some specialism in assessment at a primary level, so we're very lucky to have him on hand to have written these titles. I've sat all the tests myself, I can say, and by the end I was getting good at them. And an important factor about them is that they've been written to the standards of the Cambridge progression tests. So that means the questions are of a similar style, and the mark schemes that are provided will basically enable the teacher or whoever's marking them to mark them in the same way that Cambridge would mark them if you had sent it off to them. So it gives you a good idea of their standards and what they need to do. Okay, so ping, next, and I'll wait for the delay. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through what's in each book. Each one starts off with an introduction, which will give you a sort of a brief information about assessment and make the distinction, first of all, between formative and summative assessment. So formative is the type of assessment you use where you sort of give, where it's assessment designed to develop the students, whereas summative assessment is basically, it's a snapshot, it's a capture of the level of students' attainment at that particular moment in time. And then it gives you guidance about how to use the rest of the pack throughout the year. And you'll see, which we'll go into in more detail in just a sec, but there are 3 different types of assessments that are supplied in this pack. There's an initial assessment that you do at the beginning of the year. There's unit assessments that you do throughout the year, and an end of year assessment that you do at the end of the year, obviously. And all come with mark schemes. So I'm going to go into that in just a little bit more detail now. So if we go on to the next page. So this is an initial assessment. What it does, it's a short test. First thing you do when you get into your classroom at the beginning of the year, you basically set a small test about what you did last year. So that will tell the teacher, give the teacher some feedback as to what they remember. Do they have to go back and recap over other things before they begin this year's work, etc. Yeah, okay. So next one. So, yeah, and so as I said, each assessment comes with a mark scheme, which are on tinted pages, so they're clearly distinguished between the assessment pages themselves. And you'll notice these, and I'll just sort of go into the differences between a sort of an answer page that you might find at the back of a maths book or a teacher's guide or something, and the mark scheme and what the difference is. So the mark scheme looks like an answered paper, if you like. So it's easy for the teacher to use who's marking it, that they've got the completed paper in front of them, and it's easy for them to find what the right answer is on through the mark scheme. And obviously you've got in the margin there, you can't see, it's too small on the presentation there, but there's guidance on how to assess the students' responses. If you like, they've got a mark level, and they on questions, for example, where more than 1 mark's available or more than 1 answer is right, it gives the teacher guidance on how to allocate marks in those instances. Okay, next page. Okay, and so the next type of assessment we have are the unit assessments, which are loosely based on a sort of a half term's worth of work if you're following the Max Maths scheme of work. So what you'll notice is that each unit assessment is matched to chapters of the Max Maths scheme. So here this is a year 3 assessment, and this covers chapters 7 to 9. So they might be doing that as a half term's unit of work to be assessed at the end of the half term. Yeah, okay. And then you have mark schemes again that go with those. And the next page is your end of year test, which unsurprisingly comes at the end of the year, and it's basically it's a longer test, but it covers the entire year's work. So it'll go towards the student's end of year grade, if you like, or end of year mark. They're able to feed home to parents or feed into school data as to how well they're doing. And maybe schools will choose to follow this way rather than pay Cambridge to mark their tests for them. They might feel that this is adequate for them. Great. Okay, next. Yes, and again, you see comes with mark schemes, so we all got mark schemes. And last slide. This is what you need to know if you know nothing else from this presentation. Take this away with you. So it's six books and printable resources in the MaxMaths TRC. It's all the contents. Really, there's nothing else you should need apart from these 6 books in order to deliver a full program of summative assessment from grade 1 to grade 6. They match, they're designed to go specifically with the MaxMaths program, and they're benchmarked to the Cambridge progression tests. It costs £20 each, and I've said here their original publishing date was 31st of August. Looks like they're going to be ready a few days before that. I've got a question here from Amanda. Are all the contents that are in the print books in the TRC? I think we could. Certainly the assessments, which would be the most important bit. The idea is that they can print them out and don't have to photocopy them. But if there's benefit to them, to the whole books being in there, perhaps we can do that. Were there any other questions in the chat? Lots of people saying they can hear me. That's good. Okay.
I'm publishing early, James. You'd like to hear that? That's,
publishing early.
Very nice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In the shops for Christmas.
Okay. Any other questions on assessment? Speak now in the chat box. Okay. Great. All right. Thank you so much, James, for running through that with us.
No problem.
Okay. So out of respect for everyone's time, and I know we've been on this session for quite a while right now, we have got Bob Kibble for Science has done some great stuff for us, and we out of respect for Bob as well, we're going to play his videos in tomorrow's session. So we're going to focus on Max Science as part of tomorrow's session now, because I know we spent a little bit longer on Snappy, which is good because it was it's such a key product for us. Before you go, I did just want to quickly highlight the literacy stuff. Let me just try and get through. Here we go. So we're just going to go through, we're going to do the science stuff tomorrow. So the talk about text, what I wanted to show you, it was mentioned earlier, was the literacy reading levels chart, which you can see here on your screens, hopefully now. I know there's a bit of a delay. So this is how talk about text sits across various reading levels. So you've got on there, I don't know, like the Lexile measure has been added. That's a sort of quite an American system. The Fontys and Pinnell guided reading scheme you can see on here. The reading recovery, which is what Charlotte had mentioned most of the products are really kind of aligned to, because they've been created in Australia. But this should be quite useful when you're going into schools and they're asking how the schemes are leveled. So if you're not aware of that, you can see it here and you know it exists. And also, we're very proud of our mapping documents that we've done. The most recent is the IB PYP mapping document, which you can see on the left here. We also have a Common Core mapping document and the Cambridge English Framework. All of these documents are available in the Marketing Google Drive. Again, if you don't have access to that, please shout. It's really a key resource for you guys to sell these products. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, the sales manual does include a list of all of the resources that have been created by our fantastic marketing team to support you in selling each of these individual products. And good comment from Aaron: when you request access to the Google Drive, please use your Macmillan Education email. Amanda says you will find all of the mapping documents in the Talk About Text file. If you go in 5 minutes, you will find them there. Okay, well, it's a marathon session, 2 hours. You've done really well to last. I know it's a lot harder online than it is when you're able to get up and get coffee and speak to people face to face. So I hope you found the videos a good way of breaking up the session. And yeah, thank you for lasting it. We've still got 48 on here. I think there was 54, 53 started. So we've only lost, what, 4 or 5 on the way. That's not too bad. We'll be sharing these presentations and the recordings in due course. So you keep a lookout for those. But again, thanks so much for attending and giving your precious time to learn about these IC products. And I hope, if nothing else, you're super enthused by Snappy Sounds, and if you haven't got the physical sample packs, you request those and really kind of get to know the product and recognize the opportunity that it represents for us. All right, if there aren't any questions, I know we're 1 minute over. I did want to finish at 10:30, but do share any questions you have right now. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow. I think some people from the MENA team might be attending a session in a couple of hours, but otherwise, everyone else, we will see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for your participation.